Póvoa de Varzim, in Portugal, is an ethno-cultural entity stemming from its working classes and with influences arriving from the maritime route from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. The most charismatic of its communities, formerly overwhelmingly dominant, is the fisher community. It has significant similarities with those of the Danish fjords, and it is one of Portugal's oldest ports. Póvoa de Varzim has distinct cultural traits and a strong local identity. The expression "ala arriba" means "go upwards," and it represents the cooperation between the inhabitants while docking a boat in the beach, and it is also seen as the motto of Póvoa de Varzim. The docudrama film "Ala Arriba" by José Leitão de Barros popularized this unique Portuguese fishing community within the country during the 1940s, and Póvoan maritime culture was used by Salazar regime as a stereotype for all Portuguese. Several fishing communities in Portugal, Brazil and Portuguese-speaking Africa were influenced and started by Póvoan fishermen. Identity and ethnicity. Ethnic group Póvoa de Varzim is an ethno-cultural entity. Until the beginning of the 20th century, the communities of Póvoa de Varzim were marked by endogamy, exclusiveness and local identity features with several centuries. Due to endogamy and a caste system, the fisher community of Póvoa de Varzim kept particular ethnic features. Póvoan fishermen, supported by 19th-century scientific theories, believed they were a separate race named Racapovera. Anthropological and cultural data indicate the colonization of Nordic fishermen during the period of the coast's resettling. Since the 19th century, the visible ethnic differences when comparing with the surrounding people led to different theories over the origin of the population: Suebi, Prussians, Teutons, Normans and even Phoenicians. In the book The Races of Europe, Póvoans were considered to be slightly blonder than average, with wide faces of unknown origin and robust cheeks. In a research published in O Povero, using 19th-century scientific methodology, the anthropologist Fonseca Cardoso considered that an anthropological element, most noticeably the aquiline nose, was of Semitic Phoenician origin. He considered the Póvoans were the result of a mixture of Phoenicians, Teutons, and mostly Normans. Ramalho Ortigão, when he read about Póvoa in the book As Praias de Portugal, The Beaches of Portugal, stated that the main curiosity of Póvoa was the Póvoan fisherman. That was a special race in the Portuguese coastline, completely different from the Mediterranean type typical of Ova and Olau. Póvoans are of Saxon type. They are fair-haired, clear eyes, wide shoulders, athletic chest, Herculean legs and arms, round and strong faces. More recently, Oscar Fangueiro noticed that the Nordic influence could have happened during the late Middle Ages when Portugal built diplomatic ties with Denmark. Cultural identity. The local popular expressions Poverinhos Pelagraca de Deus and Rhino da Póvoa trace their origin to a maritime trip by King Luís I of Portugal when the king's ship, near the coast, saw a lancha Povera boat. The king was surprised with the distinct looks of the boat's crew and asked them if they were Spanish. The king's supposition shocked Póvoans and the crew said they weren't Spanish. Then the king asks if they were Portuguese, and the Póvoans replied once more they were not. They said they were Póvoans by the grace of God. Then the king asks from which kingdom they come from. They replied they were from the kingdom of Póvoa. The Póvoan fishermen only married with peoples that were part of its fisher caste, and only within its community. In Póvoa de Varzim, a small ancient fishing villages directly related with Póvoa, namely Santo André and Fão, Since the 18th century, the urban expansion of Póvoa de Varzim to the south created the new fishing communities of Póvoa da Barca and Caxianas in the municipality of Vila de Conde. As such, the ethnicity was used to justify the annexation of these areas, even during the Estado Novo regime. Currently, the racapovera expression is mostly used in football to describe perseverance and courage. Póvoan farmers along with the fishermen were also the Galician farmers. These were ancient peoples and typical northern Portuguese from the Minho region where Póvoa is located. These also contributed to the identity of Póvoa de Varzim with traditions such as Macera farm fields and the Póvoan cart, the Caracapovera. But both communities, despite sharing the same land, lived isolated from each other, mostly due to the fishermen rules. Oscar Fangueiro, author of Sete Séculos na Vida dos Poveros, contradicted the fisher endogamous theory. In his study he noticed Póvoa had immigration since very early periods and noticed that some farmers were integrated in the fisher community. Regional and foreign influence immigration from Galicia to Póvoa de Varzim is ancient. There are notable Póvoans with Galician ancestry. The Póvoan surname, Nova, is believed to be derived from Galician Novoa. With the development of fishery and, in more recent periods, beach therapy, Póvoa got even more immigration, to such an extent that the city had regional bonds stretching from Galicia, Minho, Trás-os-Montes and Barra provinces. The 20th century brought significant changes due to the popularization of beach tourism, with several people from northern Portugal, chiefly from Guimarães and Famalicão, moving to the city. Some Póvoan fishing settlements were established in the Portuguese overseas provinces in Africa in the beginning of the 20th century, and with the independence of these countries in the late 1970s, Póvoa became one of the main Portuguese cities to where the African Portuguese headed. Thus this event had particular impact in the city. In the end of the century, there's observable immigration from Eastern Europe, China, Brazil and Angola. Traditional society structure. Formerly the population was divided into different castes, depending on the daily life activities. Blancos, those who possessed boats that were capable of deep water fishing, thus more prosperous. Rasqueiros, the fisher bourgeoisie that used rasca nets to fish ray, lobster and crabs. Sardineros, faniqueiros, those who possessed small boats and could only catch fish of smaller size along the shore. Lavradors, who lived separated from the fishermen. Labrador is pronounced as Labrador. There were also the communities who joined both ways of living. Sargasseros, sargassum seaweed gatherers, used as a fertilizer in farm fields. Cireros, who fished small common and unwanted swimming crabs. Pelado, locally used to fertilize fields. As a rule, the communities remained distinct, and mixed marriages between the different communities were forbidden, mostly because of the isolationism of the fishermen, who were headed by a group of patriarchs. With the urban development and immigration at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, this caste structure is today only part of the past. The values Octavio Filgueiras noticed that appeared in Galicia boats and fishermen arriving from the north, after the critical period of the Viking and Norman raids, and one of the most important features is the cultural unity of these fisher communities, that used primitive ships. Filgueiras noticed that the use of family marks was one of the most distinctive traits of that cultural unity. This use occurred in Póvoan and Danish fishermen, but also in the Baltic, in the area of Danzig. The similarity of Siglas Poveras and the Viking runic characters show immediate associations. The traditional Casamento Povero, in which the newlywed couple was covered by a fisherman's net and watered with vinho verde in order to bring fortune to the marriage, is becoming a forgotten practice. In Póvoa's tradition, the heir of the family is the youngest son. The younger son is the heir because it was expected that he would take care of his parents when they became old. Also, unlike the rest of the nation, it is the woman who governs and leads the family. This matriarchy is derived from the fact that the man was usually fishing at sea. The Danish professor Henningsen noticed that several features in the Póvoan fisherman cultural life were similar to those found in the Jutland fjords, one of which, the women's sign of mourning, parting the skirt on the shoulders and throw the head, was found only in northern Denmark and Póvoa de Varzim. Saints stoning. In the 19th century, a Póvoan religious practice shocked the overwhelmingly Catholic country. An 1868 magazine article stated, "It is said, for a long time in Minho, that the fishermen of Póvoa de Varzim were so superstitious that the women, when there were storms, and wanting to beg to the favorite cinder saints to free the husbands' boats from the gorging ocean, they said absurd and extravagant blasphemies, like our savage people could do in front of the most ridiculous idols." The author stated, "For this reason it is told that the women of the people in dire straits walked to the chapel of St. Joseph, and that they stoned the saint, of such devotion to them, saying, 'Wake up, St. Joseph, wake up. Ush, Saint, take care of my husband, or my son, St. Joseph.'" And continued, "What is correct is that not only the women of Barrow des Jose district, but also the ones from Barrow da Lapa, that in a moment of overwhelming anxiety, when the angry and raging waves brought to the beach a cadaver with each wave, in those moments, the poor women revealed the pain that tormented them and went to the sand grounds and the ocean with a sad outcry and painful praying." Mythology. See Legends. The fishermen who traveled to Newfoundland fishing cod told stories of Eskimo women in loved by Póvoan fishermen, shipwrecks, the visits to St. John's and lost boats in the middle of the ocean, half true and half legend. The fishermen of the region are known to fish in Newfoundland since 1506. The legend of Lady of Varzim, a 13th century icon that appeared miraculously in the area of Lago das Dores over a rock with depressions similar to footprints, near the old main church of Póvoa de Varzim, an 11th century Romanesque Gothic temple, an area known to be populated by venomous reptiles, especially the grande cobra, the big snake. The pics grande, the big fish, was the name that Póvoans gave to a gigantic sea creature. On Sundays and holy days the fishermen did not go to sea because of a story concerning a Corpus Christi festival that brought numerous visitors to Póvoa de Varzim. Seeing several potential customers, the fishermen went to work at sea and filled the boat with the best fish. The happy fishermen sailed back to Póvoa. Meanwhile, they noticed pics grande following them. The mestre saw this as a divine punishment, and the fishermen threw the catch to the water to defend themselves from the creature. Docking their empty boat, they kissed the sand, and never more did the Póvoan fishermen go to sea on holy days. Supernatural beings in town. Cape Santo Andre, a place that shows evidence of Romanization and of probable earlier importance, was known in classical Latin as Promontorium Avres and in ancient Greek as Aranakron, a name of Celtic origin. It is of ancient cult in Póvoa, and was common to see groups of fishermen, holding lights in the hands, making pilgrimage to the Cape's chapel on the last evening of November. They believed St. Andrew fished from the depths the souls of the drowned. Those who did not visit Santo Andre in life would have to make the pilgrimage as a corpse. Near the Cape is a rock with depressions that the people believe are the footprints of St. Andrew. It is known that in the Great Shipwreck of 1892, several bodies were found near the Cape. Despite being barely inhabited since ancient times, St. Andrew Chapel was built in the 16th century and is the burial site of drowned fishermen found in the Cape. Fishermen also asked intervention from the saint for better fisheries. Single girls wanting to get married threw a little stone to the roof of the chapel. If the stone remained lodged in the roof, they would soon get married. The most common stories are the ones related to the Póvoa, in which some were evil, named Brujas de Diabo, and others were not responsible for the condition. Witches lived among the population, especially in the streets of Ramallah and Norte. This localization is mostly due to fishermen quarters rivalry. It was possible that a witch's husband could be unaware that his wife was a witch. The witches' fate was that, by night, they left their homes and followed the devil through the streets. By going through the streets, the witches caused damages to the inhabitants' belongings, lifting boat oars, opening farmers' casks, and causing other kinds of torments. The magical and protected use of the Sanselamau sigla, a pentagram, is associated with the witches. The use of the sigla Póvoa had several purposes, such as protection by saving a witch from her fate. To save her, a steel Sanselamau should be held in hand. Another Sanselamau should be drawn in the ground in the street where one would, during the night, wait for the devil to go through the street with the witches behind him. The one's wife stretched her hand to be pulled by her husband to the area inside the Sanselamau drawn in the ground. The other witches would torment the man, swearing and whistling. The Bezerro Maldito, the damned calf, was a damned bull or a calf that walked through the streets of Póvoa, and the people in the homes listened to the sound of its footsteps while walking through the street. In Póvoa there were no cattle. These only existed in the surrounding villages. Tia Dustera, a notable local storyteller, always listened to these stories as a child, claimed to see the damned calf on a windy summer evening. She said he was black and white, and when the calf walked through, there was so much wind that it twisted. Fonte da Bica fountain, the early water source for the city centre, was a place in which the people believed the devil appeared during Friday nights with the full moon. It was also known to help single girls to get married. North of town, Mora Encantada fountain, or Castro fountain, is a pre-Roman fountain related to the Mora, a Celtic water deity, witches, and a golden bullock cart. A similar Mora fountain existed near the old town. Mystery stones. Several granitic stones around Póvoa de Varzim were subject to pagan beliefs since prehistoric periods. The placement of the cross over a stone may reflect the Christianization of pagan cults. The legends of the Lady of Varzim and St. Andrew are both related with engraved rocks. Other stones related with divination, funerary or fertility rituals are known. At the crossroads between the parishes of Terrasso, Amorim, Nave and Estella there was, according to a 1518 description, the fig tree stone where the damned souls dwelt. The location was marked by the hell's fig tree. The belief persists to the present day. Penedos dos Gitsos and Penedo da Caixadinha were divination rocks where people would go to listen to advice. Accent. The Póvoan accent known as Falar Povero, Sotaque Povero or simply Povero, occasionally erroneously called Caxineiro, is a subdialect variety of the Portuguese dialect known by linguists as Interamnico and popularly as Nortenho or Northern Portuguese, which is the oldest dialect of the Portuguese language, and it is spoken in coastal northern Portugal from Viana do Castelo to Porto and inland. It reaches Braga. The region is the birthplace of the Portuguese language. There are two subdialects, Porto Póvoa and Braga Viana. Each of these subdialects is further divided into Porto, Póvoa, Braga, and Viana. The Póvoa one is the transitional dialect between the speeches of Braga and Porto, despite sharing numerous features found in other northern Portuguese accents. The Póvoan accent has particular features and includes influences from the region of Beira, in central Portugal, that are not found in other northern Portuguese accents, as in the pronunciation in connected speeches in os solos, which is spoken as instead of. A distinctive feature of the accent common in the fisher community is the extensive use of open vowels where standard Portuguese uses closed to nasal vowels. It occurs in words ending with a, as in batata. In the plural form, batatas, it is pronounced as or. A manner is pronounced as instead of. Currently, the urban population often pronounce it as. Our termination is always pronounced as in cow, which can pronounced as in other northern Portuguese accents and as in standard Portuguese. Similarly to Galician, ch is pronounced as instead of. Fizest can be pronounced as, although or is today much more common, and falu lhe, he spoke to him, her is pronounced as thilu. The same situation occurs with others verbs. Ufui can be pronounced as ufoi, intestino can be pronounced as indestino, and vomita can be pronounced as gomita. Póvoan vocabulary includes tarot instead of pardal, estenar instead of descasca, chopper or cho instead of rapariga, trumpetero or tropetero instead of mosquito, amelga, gano instead of gallo. Buca is referred to a forest with bushes. Dinner and lunch are often referred to as ocama, and presigo refers to the meat of fish in a meal. Primeco is often used in the same situation as amiga is used in other dialects. Traditional writing system. Siglas poveiras are a form of proto-writing system. These were used as a rudimentary visual communication system, and are thought to derive from Viking settlers that brought the writing system known as bokmål from Scandinavia. The siglas are used as a signature to sign belongings. The siglas were also used to remember marriages, trips, or debts. Thus, these were widely used chiefly because many residents did not know how to use the Latin alphabet. Thus, these runes were widely employed. Merchants used it in the books of credit, and these were read and recognized as we today read and recognize names written in Latin alphabet. These are still used, though much less commonly, by some families. The basic marks were a very restricted number of symbols from which most siglas derive. These included the arpau, the kolhoda, the lankinia, the pique, and many of these symbols were very similar to those found in Northern Europe, and generally had magical religious connotations when painted on boats. Children were given the same family mark with additions, the pique. Thus, the older son would have one pique, the next would have two, and so on. The youngest son would not have any pique, inheriting the same symbol as his father. Arts and handicrafts. Typical handicrafts include the tapetes de berries of the parish of Berries. These are distinctive carpets recognized and demanded nationally and internationally. Tapetes de berries decorate the Dutch royalty palace and Portuguese public buildings. There are also other handicrafts. The povoas rendas de bilros, the mantas de terraço, and miniatures of poveros boats. Povoan boats. The Povoan boat is a specific genre of boat characterized by a wide flat bottom and a deep helm. There were diverse boats with different sizes, uses and shapes, including Catria Pequena, Catria Grande, Keiko, and the most notable of which, the Lancha Povera. The Lancha was a large ship adapted to deep waters and used for hake fishing, the largest of which had 12 oars and could carry 30 men. Each boat carried carvings, namely a sigla povera mark for individual boat identification and magical religious protection at sea. The Lancha Povera was considered by Lixafilgueras and Rasulbranda to be descendant from the Viking longboats, keeping all the longboat features but without a long stern and bow. However, the ship has a lateen sail for better maneuvering. Music. José Trocado was a notable composer who organized Orfeón Povoense, notable all over Portugal for his creativity as a music composer. His choral society was considered by the press as the greatest in Portugal. Trocado wrote plays, namely Vindima cantata, adapted works from other authors, and was the author of Póvoa Anthem in 1916. The Conjunto Típico Ala Araba was a music group with popular songs based on Povoan themes and wearing Povoan traditional festivity clothing, with 6 commercial records and several presentations in northern and southern Portugal. Antonio dos Santos Graça was responsible for the preservation of this traditional clothing and also responsible for the preservation of Povoan fisher folk music and dances by founding the Rancho Folclórico Povero in 1936. Fashion. Traditional clothing. The camisolas poveras is part of the brancuta, the traditional dress of the fishermen of Póvoa de Varzim. The camisolas are local pullovers made for celebration and decorative purposes, initially used by the fishermen to protect them from the cold. These have fishery motifs and siglas poveras, drawings related to the Nordic runes. The pullovers have just 3 colors, white, black and red, with the name embroidered in sigla, and more recent examples also carry the name in the Latin alphabet. The pullovers were once a local dress until 1892, when a sea misfortune led the community to stop wearing it. It became popular once again at the end of the 1970s. Grace Kelly, Princess of Monaco, had a camisola povera and took a famous family picture using it. Today, there are some efforts to modernize it on one hand, and on the other there are endeavors to preserve the long-established practices. Tricana povera were common girls that used colorful costumes. The girls dressed a shawl, an apron, a skirt, a handkerchief and glossy high-heeled slippers. It was said they were the Povoan beauty icons. With the peculiar walking way and dressing style, they were girls from the common people with the mannerisms of royalty. Often, tricanas were land girls, usually employed as tailors and daughters of shoemakers, carpenters and several other crafts. They adapted the knowledge to their own dressing style. Barro de Armatres Quarter was famed for its charming and attractive tricanas. Girls from the fishermen quarters employed in sewing jobs of bob and lace were also tricanas. Fisher women had traditional costumes similar to the tricana girls, but visible poorer, with longer skirt, lower quality materials, darker colors and without the elegance of the typical walking style of the tricana povera. The pinnacle of the tricana style occurred between the 1920s and the 1960s, creating a strong impact in the communities and amongst outsiders visiting the city. Tricana costumes were fashion amongst the middle-class teenagers until the appearance of ready-to-wear clothing in the 1970s. Nowadays, tricana girls only appear in urban folklore groups, parades, and only kept as a strong tradition to this day. During Rusgas de São Pedro, part of the city festivities in June 28 and 29. Architecture. Vernacular architecture in the fisherman district were described by Rasul Brandão as Eskimo burrows. Much of these simple houses were very low buildings, and while most were lost, some kept existing to the modern period, some as ruins. One is so well preserved, including interiors, that is intended to become a museum. In the civic center, including the old one around Praça Velha Square and the new one around Praça do Almada, the bourgeoisie built houses with richer architecture. Since the 19th century, azulejo tiles started being used in popular architecture to decorate facades, by both the fisher community and the bourgeoisie. While the bourgeoisie houses had an attic, the remainder preferred a terrace that could be useful for the needs of a fisher family.